Welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm very excited to have on the phone with me today House Majority Leader Alec Garnett. How are you doing, Alec?
I'm good, Alex. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be on Connect and Collaborate.
Yes, we're so excited to have you, and we know that you're in the middle of your legislative session, so we appreciate the time that you've taken out for us. Before we get started talking about that legislative session, I would like to hear a little bit of background about yourself and why you chose politics.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm a fourth-generation Coloradan. My mom's side of the family grew up farming in Brush, Colorado, and my dad's side were were miners up in Gilman County, or at the Gilman mine in Eagle County. And so I have really deep Colorado roots, and my mom was a school teacher and my dad was on the school board, and so we were always talking about public education around the dinner table, and we loved going out in the outdoors and fly fishing and sort of all of these issues, from growing up in Colorado to being around people who really prioritized giving back to the community, got me interested in politics when I was in college. And so I interned for Congressman Udall when he was still representing Colorado's 2nd Congressional District in Washington in 2003, and then worked for Congressman Perlmutter when he won his race in 2006, and I was one of his legislative assistants in D.C. And so I was sort of connected to policy and public service at an early age, and then sort of wound up in a situation in Denver in 2013 where a seat opened up, and at the time my fiance, we're now married with 2 kids, said, you should try and run. It's House District 2 is the youngest House district based on average age of voter in the state. And so she thought, a lot of the issues that are impacting us on a daily basis and a monthly basis are probably impacting a lot of constituents, so maybe you can be their voice at the Capitol. So I went out and knocked on 15,000 doors in a pretty tough race, and it all worked out. And fast forward 4 years, and I'm starting my 5th year in the legislature.
Wonderful. That is great to hear. So what would you say after 5 years in the legislature has been your favorite project that you've worked on? I'm sure all of them are favorites at one point or another, but is there one that really stands out for you?
One of the things that really stands out is the bipartisan work that we were able to accomplish around construction defect reform in 2015. Obviously, construction defect reform was something that had impacted the business community and the development community around building new condos for a really long time. And we were able to come together in some pretty tense negotiations with both sides to come together on a pretty moderate solution to really spur some of the condo development that we're starting to see around the metro area, which I think is up 17% in 2017. We haven't gotten the numbers back for 2018, but I continue to hear sort of a building of confidence in the marketplace. And that was a very complicated, complex legislative solution that we came up with, and one that took a lot of time, and I actually thought we might not ever be able to get done. So when we were able to all stand up and shake hands and then make it through the legislative process, it really felt like an accomplishment that was good for the state, but also really important to the district that I represent.
Absolutely. And as someone that's a part of your district, I really appreciated that too.
Good.
Yes. So let's talk about this legislative session. You mentioned a little bit there working across the aisle, and as we know, we have a new governorship, and we've gone all blue in Colorado, which is something new for us. We've typically been a very purple state. So let's talk about this legislative session and how hopeful we are in working across the aisle with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there are many of us, especially members of on the leadership teams of both the House and the Senate, that have really encouraged everybody to maintain the discipline that's created the very strong policy in the past, and that discipline is rooted in bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle. Partly because there is no such thing as a good idea is not just a Republican idea or a Democratic idea. It's just a good idea. And what I have found is the best strength of a talented policymaker is the ability to listen. And so what I think is going to happen is you're going to see a lot of attempts to reach across the aisle, to sit down, especially on issues that we don't agree on, to listen to the other side to see if there's ways that we can incorporate ideas that we otherwise wouldn't be thinking of. And I think that the Coloradans should feel confident that, between 85 and 91% of the stuff that we get done, the bills that we pass, are bipartisan. So there's always going to be the stuff that, both sides don't agree on. And, in an environment like you described, which is all blue, some of those ideas might have a better chance of making it through the process than they have in the past, at least on the things that the Democrats aren't able to get to agreement on with the Republicans. But the vast majority of stuff that you'll see make it through the process will be bipartisan, and I think you'll see the discipline to stay cold and to listen and to reach across the aisle with the hope of making everything or the most that we can bipartisan.
Absolutely. Is there any piece of specific legislation to you that hasn't passed before that you think might get passed this year?
Yeah, there's definitely some issues. So I'm sure that if your listeners are tuning in to a lot of these interviews, issues like family medical leave that's come up in the past but not made it through is an issue that I think there's been a lot of stakeholding on, a lot of work on. There's issues around, sort of common sense legislation around extreme risk protection orders, which are, how do we enable law enforcement to step in if somebody's in crisis and temporarily remove their firearms so nobody gets hurt. That didn't make it all the way through the process. That you'll see, I think, have a good shot at making it through. There's some other issues that we haven't sort of dug in on because the state. I guess we have dug in on the past, but around sort of oil and gas and local control that, didn't make it very far in the Republican-controlled Senate. So these are ideas that I think will have sort of a longer day in the sun and a lot more attention on them as they make their way through the legislative process, because in the past people just assumed that they weren't going to be signed into law, and that's what happened.
Nice. Very well said. I want to get in here with some of your specific bills that you have your signature on. So let's look at this first one that I have here, and that's SB 011. That's fermented malt beverage and liquor license. Do you mind explaining that to me? I know we've gone through some legislation lately, particularly in Colorado, when it comes to liquor. Is it along those lines, or is this somewhere else?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Alex. It is. It's right in line with some of the major reforms that we have created in our liquor and essentially liquor code since 2016. In 2016 we passed Senate Bill 197, which was pretty much the biggest rewrite of the liquor code since Prohibition. And with any big rewrite like that, what happens is as you get closer to key benchmarks and implementation, and in that piece of legislation, it was moving to January 1st of 2019, when full-strength beer was allowed to be sold in any store around the state that had a 3-2 license, to a retail license to sell it in the past. As we moved closer to that deadline, we started to realize that there were some unintended consequences in the reform that we passed in 2016, one of them being that the way that the Liquor Enforcement Division within the Department of Revenue was analyzing the statute, that manufacturers and distributors of full-strength and 3-2 beer were not allowed to create them, manufacture them together, and or transport them together on the distribution side to the retailer. And so all we did in Senate Bill 11 was consolidate the two licenses on the manufacturing and the distribution side to just clean up some impractical realities that came out of some of the bills that the bill that we passed in 2016. And my whole thing is any good legislative body is willing to admit when they've made a mistake or that they've created an unintended consequence. So a lot of the work that we do down here is, sort of tidying up or tying off loose ends or buttoning up ideas that we've passed in prior legislatures. But it is a sign of a healthy government when you see the legislature coming back in a bipartisan way and just making sure that the ideas that we're coming out with actually make sense in the real world and don't disrupt the marketplace in a way that we didn't intend to.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with you on saying that, it is a sign of a healthy government to say, oops, you know what, we totally overlooked that, let's go fix that. And you did. Well, it's on the floor at least. So any reason why that one may not get pushed through?
No, we actually we voted on it this morning, and it came out unanimously from the House, and it came out unanimous from the Senate too. So I think it's on its way to the governor's desk, which is good because the Liquor Enforcement Division gave everybody a waiver until February 1st so that we could clean this up. So I'm glad that the legislature was able to, another good sign of healthy government is when we realize that we're under a time constraint and we can all kind of come together in a bipartisan way. So there's times where I think a lot of people think government is, especially, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but, on the federal level, I think a lot of people get frustrated with some of the things that, that wouldn't happen in a normal business setting or in a normal relationship where, just nothing gets done. But this was an example of where we were able to even move swiftly, and I think a lot of people think government can't do that. So it was a good example of when we come together and we work together, we can solve problems even in a short amount of time.
Yes, absolutely. And government moving swiftly. It sounds like an oxymoron, but you are right. There are a lot of times.
Right.
So moving on, we also have bill here, SJR 001. That's the adoption of joint rules of the 72nd General Assembly. Yeah, so what exactly does that one entail?
So that is because I'm the majority leader, I work pretty closely with Representative Patrick Neville, who's the minority leader. And when a new, so after an election and you come into a new General Assembly, so I think we're in the 72nd General Assembly, what you do is you establish rules between, like rules on the floor, rules of procedure, rules that govern the relationship between both the House and the Senate that you have to put in place that will then go into effect for 2 years. And so what we did is we adopted those rules to kind of set the framework for the legislative session to get underway.
Okay, so I guess, and this is going to probably make me sound uneducated, but I didn't realize that you had to implement new rules every 2 years. I imagine that you don't change very much every 2 years, right?
Yep, you're exactly right.
Awesome. So let's talk about HJR 1001, Canvass of Votes.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit more of an interesting topic than it normally is. What you do there is the Canvass of Votes is a resolution adopting the determination of the Secretary of State of who won elections across the state during the general election in November of 2018. And so what each member gets after their election is a certificate of the election. So a certificate that says that each person who is sitting in the body won their election. And what you do is you adopt the Secretary of State, who is the expert, who runs all of our elections and who works with the county clerks to administer the elections, you adopt their results. There was an issue this year around one of our representatives from the Western Slope. There was a challenge to their residency that actually ended up being dropped, but it did draw a little bit more attention around that particular resolution than it has in the past. But again, it is a resolution that sort of sets up the next 2 years for the Colorado General Assembly to operate, and who's allowed to vote and who's going to hold the seat of representative. We have to adopt the results of the Secretary of State.
Awesome. That is great to know. So we have roughly 9 minutes left in the segment. So for saving on time's sake, I'm going to lump these next three together, and that's HJR 1002, 1003, 1004. And in order, those are joint session for governor's message, joint session for message from judiciary, and joint rules committees of reference. Do you mind touching on those and what exactly they mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we hear the state of the state from the governor, and when we hear the state of the judiciary, and so, remember, and this is something that I never really connected all the dots on until I paid a little bit closer attention. We have a state of the city, and a lot of cities across the state of Colorado have a state of the city, and that's sort of like, you can take it all the way up to the State of the Union, which is actually in the news today. But the State of the State is a speech that the House of Representatives and the Senate, the members of the Senate, come together on for a joint session to hear from the governor about how is our state doing each year, and we do that in a joint session. So whenever you actually bring both bodies together to do something as one, you have to pass a resolution allowing that to happen. So you do that for both the state of the state and the state of the judiciary. And then when you appoint people to key committees that, again, help with business in the Capitol, the Audit Committee, the Legislative Services Committee, you do that by resolution. And so that other resolution that you mentioned is appointing members to those key committees that kind of help with the functioning of the institution of the Capitol.
Wonderful. That is great. I'm learning so much today. I appreciate that.
You got it.
Yeah, so, and I like that you said that you had to pay more attention. It's encouraging to know that as an average American, I may not know much about the system, the governing system here, but to know that you're also having to dig deeper and look a little harder at these entities makes me feel good about where I am. Yeah. Yeah,
no, you're right. I think what I've learned is, we have a citizen legislature, and there have been 1,000 legislators that came before me, and there will be thousands that come after me. And I think, what I have learned is a real love for the institution and a love for the state and a love for the staff that helps this institution run each year because, it's a huge team and everyone puts the state first. And regardless of who's in the majority or the minority, the Capitol and the institution itself is always in good hands.
Yes, absolutely. We have about 6 minutes left in this segment, and so I'm going to switch gears on you from talking about specific bills to overall goals that you have for 2019, either for yourself, maybe for what you want to see happen in this legislative session, but also most particularly what you would like to see happen for District 2.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. So I'll start with District 2, and it kind of molds into what I hope. What I hope for one of the major goals of this session. HD2 is in the heart of Denver. It has some of the hippest, coolest neighborhoods around, and I'm really proud to represent it. It's an honor and a privilege. We have a lot of young families in our district, and one thing that really impacts my family, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, is the cost of childcare. And it is obviously a high priority for my wife and I to prioritize the child care costs, because I know access to high quality early childhood education is a key aspect for my kids, and if that means shifting around budget priorities or making sacrifices here or there, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But a lot of families don't have the opportunity, don't have the privilege of making that sacrifice, and so if the state can do more to invest more in our future by investing in more early childhood education, and you've heard a lot about this coming from the new governor around investing in kindergarten, and so that every parent in Denver Public Schools has access to free full-day K. That's a start. It doesn't solve all of our problems. It certainly doesn't alleviate some of the high costs on the earliest years of early childhood education, but it's a start, and it's an important step. And so I think if we can get to the end of this legislative session and feel like we have invested in more in K through 12, and especially in that K piece, I think that's a key thing that is a goal of mine, and it should be a goal of House District 2.
Yes, agreed. And thank you for the compliment of the hippest neighborhoods in District 2. I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
Right, that's right.
So you mentioned Governor Polis, and he is very excited and ready to work on some education policies. What are your thoughts on working under this new governorship? Are you excited? Where do you think we're going to go with him?
Yeah, I am excited. I mean, I have known Governor Polis for a long time. I think that Governor Polis knows how to move forward and achieve a vision around sort of goals that he's oriented around. We've seen it from his early days running for the State Board of Education to when he was in Congress, and he made a lot of commitments to the people of Colorado when he was running for governor, and he's committed to fulfilling those. And so I'm excited to work with him. It certainly is with a change in administration, when you have spent sort of half my legislative career with one governor and now I get to spend half with a new governor. There is a little bit of a transition, but it's a welcome transition. I really enjoyed working with Governor Hickenlooper, but I've really enjoyed my time with Governor Polis, and I think working together in a bipartisan way, we can solve a lot of the issues that families are experiencing on a monthly basis around the rising cost of living here in Colorado. I think it's one thing that seems so basic. Healthcare costs are increasing, the cost of housing is increasing, the cost of getting to and from work because of transportation congestion is increasing, the early childhood's increasing. All these things continue to increase, and people feel like our economy is working, but it doesn't seem to be working on the grassroots level for everybody. So is there ways that we can alleviate some of those pain points? And I think this governor's sort of keenly focused on that, and I'm excited about it, and I am excited to work with him on it.
Well, we're excited to see where this goes with new Governor Polis, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much, House Majority Leader Alec Garnett, for joining me today on Connect and Collaborate.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Have a wonderful day. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. And check out this podcast some more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Thank you so much.